Welcome to Consonant Sounds and Voicing. We've been talking about how to describe consonants. So far, we've looked at place and manner of articulation, and we've left voicing towards the end. Usually when you describe a consonant, you describe first voicing, then place, then manner. So you would ask yourself, why have we left voicing towards the end? And it's mainly because of two reasons. The first is because it's a very simple concept, so it's easier to add on to the other concepts. And then second, I believe that it's easier to understand how the whole sound system works after you've looked at place and manner and you add voicing to that. It gives you a different insight. So let's start with voicing. Let's look at the difference between these two sounds. Let's try the first sound. S, s, s. Now let's try the second sound. Z, z, z. The difference is actually quite clear, but if it's not 100% clear, take your hand and wrap it around your throat. And then let's produce these sounds again with your hand wrapped around your throat. S, s, s. Now try the second sound. Z, z, z. There should be a very clear difference in vibration in your throat. I'm sure you felt that with your hand wrapped around your throat. Let's do the same thing. Keep your hand there and let's try these two sounds. D, d, d. Now let's try the other sound. T, t, t. The same thing is happening. When we look at these two sounds, they're happening at the same place and manner of articulation, but they're still different. And when we look at these two, it's exactly the same case. So let's go deeper into what voicing means. Voicing is the quality of the sounds that are produced with the vibration of the vocal cords. So when you take the vocal cords and they vibrate, they create sounds. Like for example, all vowels are voiced. If you do ah, for example, you will notice that there is vibration happening. If you do the same thing without vibration, then it would just be air coming out of your mouth. The vocal cords are a very important part of making sounds. So when you look at the vocal cords and how they're working with the production of sounds, you have voiced sounds, which are the sounds that are produced with vibration of the vocal cords. In other words, your voice is on for these sounds. So for example, b, b. If you take your hand again and wrap it around your throat and try b, b, you can feel that vibration happening there. The same thing happens with d, d. There's a vibration behind the explosion of that stop. Same thing happens here. G, g, g. However, if you turn your voice off and you produce the same sound, you would be producing a voiceless sound. It's also called an unvoiced sound. And in other words, it's sounds produced without the vibration of the vocal cords or with your voice off. So if we take b, which is voiced, but apply no vibration of the vocal cords, then we get p, p, which is just air coming out. But the obstruction that's happening at the lips creates this sound, which is a voiceless sound. Same thing would happen with t. So if you have a d and then a t, that's a difference where the first sound, the voice is on, and the second sound, the voice is off. There is no vibration of the vocal cords for that second sound. And exactly the same thing happens with g and k. It's just air. That second sound, which is voiceless, is just air. So if you notice, the B and the P, or the B and the P, are both bilabial stops. But the difference is that B is a voiced bilabial stop and P is a voiceless bilabial stop. So all the examples in this page are actually stops. But then the D and the T, one is the voiced alveolar stop and the other is the voiceless alveolar stop. And then you have the voiced velar stop versus the voiceless velar stop. And that is the difference in the quality between the column on the left and the column on the right. And it's the vibration of the vocal cords. So if we look at all the manners of articulation, you have stops, fricatives, affricates, nasals, liquids, and glides. And the interesting thing is that in the stops, the fricatives, and affricates, they will always have a counterpart. In other words, there will always be a voiced sound for every voiceless sound, or if you want to say it the other way around, there's always a voiceless sound for a voiced sound. So you have b and p, which are pairs, but they're counterparts, sort of like the evil twins. You have a voiced sound and then a voiceless sound, which are the same place and the same manner, but they vary only in voicing. Same thing with d and t that we just saw, and g and k. But that's the same thing exactly that happens with v and f. You have the voiced labiodental fricative and the voiceless labiodental fricative. Then you have the same thing with th and th, and z and s, and zh and sh. And the same thing happens with the affricates, which there are only two, but one is voiced, which is j, and then the other one is voiceless, ch. Now, when it comes to nasals, liquids, and glides, there are no voiceless counterparts. All nasals, liquids, and glides are voiced. So that's something that's very easy to remember. If you know that all nasals, liquids, and glides are voiced, then you already know that this is the voiced bilabial nasal. And then you have the voiced alveolar nasal, and so on and so forth. So this is what we mean by voiced and voiceless counterparts. So stops, fricatives, and affricates have a pair, while nasals, liquids, and glides do not have a counterpart or an evil twin, if you want to look at it like that. So when we look at describing consonants, we're talking about how to use voicing, place, and manner to know exactly what consonant it is. So if we take the ch, you could start off from any point. For example, you could say, oh, this is two syllables, so I already know this is going to be an affricate. But the first thing that you need to describe a consonant is voicing. So this is a voiceless, and then the place, which is an alveopalatal. And then finally, the manner, which is an affricate. So this is a voiceless alveopalatal affricate. If we look at another one, well, same thing. Start with voicing, voiced, then place, labiodental, and then finally, manner, fricative. So this is a voiced labiodental fricative. Can you guess what this is? This is a voiced bilabial nasal. For example, this one, you know where it happens, you know how it happens, but you have to start with voiceless velar stop. You try this one. I'll give you a couple of seconds. If you said this is the voiced alveolar retroflex, then you are correct. Let's try one more. This is a glide, which means it's going to be voiced because glides don't have a voiced voiceless counterpart. So this is a voiced, and we know this as a bilabial glide. One more. This is a voiceless interdental fricative. If we look at the first example that I gave you at the beginning of the video, the difference between s and z, we can say s is voiceless alveolar fricative, while its counterpart z is a voiced alveolar fricative. And then the same thing that we've already seen this a couple of times, you have the voiced alveolar stop versus the voiceless alveolar stop. So let's try to do a dictation practice. You already know how this works, so number your paper from 1 to 10, and the first 5 I dictate, you will transcribe the initial phoneme and its description, which now I'm going to ask you for voicing, place, and manner of articulation. So for example, if I dictate came, 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 you will look at the initial sound and write the phoneme and the description, which is a voiceless velar stop. Now for words 6 through 10, you're going to transcribe the final phoneme and its description, which again, is voicing, place, and manner. So in the case of came, you would transcribe the voiced bilabial nasal. Okay, so let's start. If you need more time, just pause the video after every word so that you have enough time to write. Number 1, talk, talk, talk. Number 2, buzz, buzz, buzz. Number 3, champion, champion, champion. Number 4, loaf, loaf, loaf. Number 5, ring, ring, ring. Now we're going for final sounds. Number 6, talk, talk, talk. Number 7, buzz, buzz, buzz. Number 8, champion, champion, champion. Number 9, loaf, loaf, loaf. Number 10, ring, ring, ring. And that's it. These are the answers. I hope you did okay and that you now have a little bit more insight into the description of consonants.